What happens when a Delta operator crosses the line, but not far enough to get kicked out? The answer isn't in any official document. It's something the unit handles on its own terms. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how it works. There is a version of Delta Force where nobody gets fired, nobody gets demoted, and nobody signs a single piece of paper, and it's still considered, by the men who've lived it, the worst punishment the unit has to offer. So what's worse than getting kicked out? Staying in, and having no one look you in the eye. The formal side of Delta Force is what people picture from the outside: command structure, selection, mission rosters. But the unit runs on something underneath that, something no org chart captures: the judgment of the men standing next to you. Multiple former operators, across different interviews and books written about Tier 1 units over the years, describe the same phenomenon in different words. It isn't a system anyone designed on purpose. It's just what happens when a small group of people rely on each other to stay alive, and one of them stops being trusted. Picture it from the inside. You made a call under pressure, maybe during training, maybe on an actual op, and it was the wrong one. Nobody writes you up. Nobody pulls you into an office. The next morning, briefings happen the same way they always did. Except now, the guy who used to loop you into the side conversations doesn't. The team that used to save you a seat doesn't, not out of cruelty, just out of habit shifting somewhere you weren't invited. That's the part outsiders get wrong about elite units. They assume respect is earned once, in selection, and then it's yours. It isn't. In a place like Delta, trust is a balance that gets checked constantly, silently, without a formal audit, and once it dips, there's no form to fill out to get it back. There's an irony in that, if you sit with it long enough. The military loves paperwork. Loves it. Every reprimand, every commendation, every step in a soldier's career gets logged somewhere. And yet the punishment that operators describe as the hardest to carry is the one piece of feedback that never touches a file. Because here's the thing about operating at that level: your teammates aren't coworkers you can avoid at the water cooler. They're the people whose hands you trust with your life in a stack, on a breach, in a room you can't see into until you're already inside it. When that trust cracks, even quietly, it doesn't stay contained to a Tuesday afternoon. It follows you into the next op. And the unit doesn't correct this the way a normal workplace might, with a mediator or a sit-down. It lets the silence do the work. Some operators describe eventually earning it back, a slow, wordless process of being tested again in small moments until the room lets you back in. Others describe never quite getting there, staying technically on the team while functionally on the outside of it. What makes this especially brutal is that there's no appeal. You can't argue with a feeling in a room. You can't file a grievance against being spoken to slightly less, included slightly later, trusted slightly thinner. It's punishment with no accused, no verdict, and no end date you can circle on a calendar. Command, for what it's worth, tends to let this play out. Several accounts suggest leadership treats peer dynamics as something closer to a self-correcting organism than a problem to manage, interfering only if it starts to actually threaten the team's function. Which means, in practice, the harshest judge in the room usually isn't wearing rank. It's a strange kind of justice. No file. No hearing. No expulsion. Just the room getting a little quieter every time you walk into it. If a story like this is the kind of thing you want more of, the parts of these units that never make it into the official history, the way to see the next one land in your feed is simple: subscribe now, and it'll be waiting for you. There's a version of punishment that doesn't isolate a man from his teammates, it isolates him from the work itself. And in a unit built entirely around one purpose, that might be the crueler cut. So what happens when the silence isn't enough? When a mistake is bigger than a cold shoulder can fix, but still not big enough to end a career? Former operators and researchers who've studied Tier 1 units describe something that has no official name, no paperwork trail, no line item in any manual. Call it what several veterans have called it in indirect accounts: a bench. Not a punishment in the legal sense. More like a quiet redirection. The highest risk missions simply stop landing on your rotation for a while. It's worth sitting with how that actually plays out day to day, because it isn't dramatic on the surface. Nobody announces it. There's no meeting where a commander explains you're being held back. You just notice, over a stretch of weeks, that the assignments landing on your desk are a step down from what they used to be. Training runs instead of live ops. Support roles instead of the door. For most people in most jobs, that might read as a mild inconvenience. For an operator who has spent years building toward the exact kind of high-stakes work Delta exists to do, it reads as something closer to erasure. You're still in the building. You're still wearing the uniform. But the thing you trained your entire adult life to be trusted with, the thing that defines you inside that community, has quietly been taken off the table. There's a psychological weight to that kind of limbo that a formal punishment doesn't carry. A suspension has an end date. A reprimand has a file you can eventually close. This has neither. Nobody tells you how long the bench lasts, because nobody officially admits the bench exists. You're left guessing whether it's been 2 weeks or 2 months, and whether the next rotation will finally include you or quietly skip you again. What makes this mechanism especially interesting is what it says about how Delta actually manages risk. The unit isn't interested in optics or making an example out of someone in front of the rest of the team. The peer dynamic from before already handles that side of things. This is colder, more practical. If your judgment failed once under pressure, command doesn't need to punish you to protect the mission. It just needs to not put you back in that pressure until it's confident you're ready for it again. That distinction matters. This isn't about morality or shame. It's about a probability calculation, one nobody says out loud, but everyone on the team can feel. And the way back is the same as it was with the silence, nothing formal. No review board reinstates you. No memo lifts the hold. You simply start getting looped into higher stakes planning again, a little at a time, and you learn to read that inclusion as the only confirmation you're going to get that the bench is over. Some operators, according to the same indirect accounts, never fully climb back to where they were. Others do, and go on to have long careers inside the unit. Reputational currency, once spent, doesn't have a fixed exchange rate for getting it back. One number sits underneath all of this, and it's the only cold fact in the whole system: 0. 0 official memos. 0 forms. 0 acknowledgement, from Delta or from the Army, that any of it ever happens. 1992, a Fort Bragg conference room, half-empty chairs, a former operator standing at the front about to publish the book that would define how the outside world understood Delta Force for the next 3 decades. His name was Eric Haney. His book was called Inside Delta Force. And for a huge number of people, journalists, filmmakers, curious civilians who'd never get within a mile of a real operator, that book became the primary window into a unit that otherwise kept its doors sealed shut. Here's the problem. Not everyone who served alongside Haney agrees with the version of events he put on paper. Some former colleagues have pushed back publicly, and pointedly, on parts of his account. One of the specific claims that drew criticism, Haney's description of himself as a founding member of the unit, present at its creation in ways some others who were actually their dispute. It's the kind of detail that seems small until you realize how much weight it carries. If a source positions himself as present at the birth of an organization, every claim after that inherits some of that authority. Undercut the origin story, and you start to wonder what else got adjusted along the way. This isn't a fringe accusation buried in an obscure forum, either. It's documented enough that it shows up in mainstream reporting and even on the book's own Wikipedia page, a level of scrutiny that most military memoirs never receive. And that raises an uncomfortable question for anyone using Haney's book as source material, this video included. If the author's own colleagues dispute his role in the unit's founding, how much of the rest of the book should be treated as fact, and how much is a good story told by someone who was, at minimum, there for some of it? There's no clean answer. That's the honest version. What tends to happen with books like this, insider accounts from closed-off, secretive worlds, is that they get treated as gospel simply because there's so little else to compare them against. Delta Force doesn't hold press conferences. It doesn't publish annual reports. When one person writes a detailed, readable, human account of what happened inside, that account can end up carrying far more weight than a single source should. Doesn't mean throw the book out. Means read it with your eyes open. Some of what Haney describes lines up with details corroborated elsewhere, other veterans, other books, other reporting on Tier 1 culture. Other parts exist only in his telling, unconfirmed, unchallenged by anyone with the standing to challenge them until years later. That distinction matters more than usual for what comes next in this video, because the next part, the one rule inside Delta that's said to carry automatic, no exceptions punishment, comes straight from Haney's book. No second source. No independent confirmation. Just one man's account of the one line nobody in the unit is allowed to cross. So take it the way you'd take any single witness testimony to something nobody else was in the room to record. Compelling. Specific. Impossible to fully verify. What do you do with a story you can't confirm, but can't dismiss either? Every system this video has covered so far shares one thing in common: none of it is written down anywhere official. The silence, the bench, the slow climb back into trust, all of it exists in the gray space between rules. Delta Force, as an organization, runs almost entirely on that gray space. Except for one line. According to Haney's account, there is exactly one infraction inside the unit that carries automatic, no exceptions punishment. Not a suspension. Not a bench. Immediate expulsion, no appeal, no gray area at all. Strike another operator, and you're out. Zoom out for a second and think about what that actually means for an organization built the way Delta is built. This is a unit designed to select for aggression, for split-second violence, for men who can end a threat with their hands in the time it takes most people to flinch. Put a few dozen of those men in close quarters, under exhaustion, under pressure, for years at a time, and somehow, physical conflict between them is the one thing treated as more dangerous than almost anything else that happens in that building. That's not an accident. Think about what a unit like this actually depends on to function. Every operation requires total trust that the man next to you will move exactly where you expect, exactly when you expect it, without hesitation and without ego getting in the way. A single act of violence between teammates doesn't just end a friendship, it puts a crack directly through the foundation the entire team stands on. If operators can't trust each other not to turn on one another inside the compound, nothing that happens outside it matters. So the rule isn't really about the punch. It's about what the punch represents, a total, irreversible failure of the one thing the unit cannot function without. According to Haney, this rule has been enforced exactly once in the entire known history of the unit. One incident. One operator gone. No exceptions made, no rank or reputation protecting the person involved. Sit with that number for a second. 1. Every other kind of failure this video has covered, bad judgment calls, mistakes under pressure, moments that cost the trust of a team, all of it has some form of a path back. Some way to earn your way out of the doghouse, however slow or uncertain that path might be. This is the only door that closes and stays closed. And maybe that tells you something true about how this unit actually thinks about risk. It isn't the mistake that gets you expelled. It's the mistake that can never be won.